of the things about myself, I've been a leader all my life. I went to West Point, the United States Military Academy, and right from the get-go, I was in charge of 40 soldiers after graduation. And one thing I've also done is I've always been looking for ways to, how do I build a better mousetrap? What are the most efficient ways to do this? I've really always been interested in technology, and how can I use technology to make my processes more efficient? And I basically followed my curiosity to solve problems. And I've always been an integrator. I've lived in the world between the decision maker and the technologist. As a decision maker who loved getting his hands dirty and just learning about stuff, like, man, this is kind of cool. And, taught myself how to code. And then now I love it, this world we live in, where there's low code, no code solutions. And it's important, I think, for organizations to adapt and to stay agile and to adapt to new ways of doing things. I've been a reformer in one of the biggest bureaucracies in the world. This, if you can see this in my camera there, this is a letter I had from the Commandant of the Field Artillery School. I wrote a paper called Innovation and Adaptation for Field Artillery when I was still a cadet. And he basically says in that letter, thank you for sharing this paper with me. I'm going to have my staff review it. And when I went to the Field Artillery Officer Basic course, I saw that my paper was being cited in some of the presentations. They're talking about the new ways of using field artillery and integrating with digital communications. That was pretty cool. As a diplomat, I started complaining about the lack of technology in the federal government, and that led to me, I'll talk about my paper I wrote there, that led to me getting a job on this multi-agency AI task force to help bring AI to the federal government. And really, and I'll tell you what, it was a battle. And that sequence of events led to me being picked up by Data Robot, where I was Director of Strategic Initiatives, reporting directly to the CEO and co-founder, Jeremy Asian. And today, CTO of Sciencella, and also with an AI advisor for Velocity, and CTO for Royal Technology in the agricultural space, Velocity in the government consulting space. And what I'm really excited about Sciencella, we're in the health tech space. Really excited. We're about to have our MVP ready to go here at the end of the month. And hey, for any of you looking for jobs, anyone who are knowing great data scientists, hey, let me know. So why I care. And I think as leaders, we need to be looking at the future. I mentioned my dad, he's 73 years old. He loves working. And how does someone like that stay relevant in an era of new technology? And I look about the future, and as leaders, we have to think about things. As jobs change, as technology changes or replaces jobs, how do we keep good people? How do we stay ahead of it? How do we keep our organizations relevant? Because if you're not adapting to the new, you are irrelevant. And how do we help our fellow humans thrive? I'll give you an example. This is something as we as leaders and citizens should be thinking about. In 37 out of 50 states, truck driver is the #1 employment opportunity. And autonomous cars. When is that happening? I don't know, but it's happening. You've already, the Chinese are doing a lot of research with autonomous trucks. Certain IKEA stores have autonomous vehicles moving back and forth between IKEA stores. We could be facing massive unemployment if we don't get ahead of this and teaching people the right skills. And this presentation, leaders, I'm going to break this presentation up into a couple segments. Segment number 1, if you are the leader, how do you adapt an AI culture? How do you get to appreciate AI and see what it can do? But also, if you're the technologist, how do you persuade? How do you get the organization to value what you do and get them to change? So the quote there at the top, AI is too important to be left to the technologists. This is a play off of Clemenceau's quotation in World War I, the premier of France in World War I, when he said, war is too important to be left to the generals. AI is a leader's program. After all, you are running the company, and you have to understand you are providing the direction on what problem are you solving? Who are you serving? Are you doing things to improve your internal processes, or are you trying to help an external customer? What resources do you have, and what resources do you need? Your personnel. Do you have the right people? And if not, who do you need to bring on board? And most importantly, the outcome. What is the end state? When you're saying, so many leaders say, I want AI. Well, what do you want the AI to do? I want to share with you a little lesson from history. And this conveys a very important idea. AI is only as good as the data. And if your model is trained on faulty data, you might have some bad decisions. And I'm going to use to showcase the story of this Robert E. Lee at the Battle of Gettysburg. And in the Civil War, Robert E. Lee was viewed as the most tactically competent general of the war by a lot of people, certainly up to this point of Gettysburg. And yet, on day 3 of the Battle of Gettysburg, he launched a suicide mission known today as Pickett's Charge. Why did he do this? Well, let's think of it from an AI context. The data he used was Napoleonic tactics. He studied the tactics of Napoleon at West Point, and he used those tactics as a young officer in the Mexican War. And what Napoleon did, Napoleon he would attack the flank of the enemy. So let's say he attacked the right flank. Remember, the army stood face to face. He'd attack the right flank. They take troops from the center, reinforce the right. Then they hit the left flank. The enemy would take troops from the center, reinforce the left. Suddenly, the center is the weakest point, and Napoleon would ram right through the center. But what happened at Pickett's Charge? See, what Robert E. Lee did not account for is that while the rifle looked physically the same as it did when he was a young captain in the Mexican War and when he studied Napoleon, there was a small but important innovation inside the barrel of those rifles. Rifling, the grooves that made the bullet far more accurate and gave it longer range. So what was a successful tactic not too many years before was now a suicide mission. Taking it once again to the AI context, leaders have to know whether they should veto the AI or not. And so imagine you're Robert E. Lee and you had an AI model saying, hey, I trained on Napoleonic tactics and you should go right up the center now. This is the way you do it. This is because we trained on Napoleon, the guy who won. This is what you need to do. But the smart leader would say, wait a minute, my model does not factor in rifling. That's the one thing we don't factor. That's the piece of data we do not consider. So I'm going to veto this and do something else. But you can't do that unless you understand what goes into it. And that's why I said in the previous slide, AI is too important to be left to technologists. Leaders have to be in this. And why I believe this, I think AI, excuse me, is one of these things where it's not just a tool, and a lot of organizations we look at it as a tool. AI is going to be integrated into every facet of our lives with wearables tracking our health. You know, when we commute, we have AI telling us what the best way to go is. All these things, it's just a seamless integration, and we need to seamlessly integrate AI into our business problems. Getting your hands dirty. This is what leaders need to do. And one of the biggest faults I've seen with AI training for leaders is you give some high-level PowerPoint presentation. Ironic, because I'm giving a PowerPoint presentation, but there's no means of getting your hands dirty. So that brings us to the US Army in Vietnam. The Army decided that they were going to use the air mobile concept for counterinsurgency, rely on a helicopter. So what did they do? They took all these infantry battalion commanders, these are lieutenant colonels, and brigade commanders, these are colonels, and they sent them to flight school. Not because they were going to fly helicopters in combat, no, but the helicopter was central to operations in Vietnam. It was your troop transportation. It was your air support in the form of gunships. It was your medical evacuation. It was your supplies and logistics. So you had to know how this all came together. And that's where I think we have to do with AI for executives. My own story about this, I had a leadership consulting company, and I had started doing things AI for decision makers and companies that were part of my core leadership program, which is more experiential in nature based on my Army experience, taking people outside in the woods, doing a Civil War battlefields and understanding leadership through history. But COVID hits, we're not doing that. So I came up with a new curriculum, and AI for decision makers based on the fact that companies started calling me like, hey, I want to implement AI. I have these data scientists, but I don't know how to use them. So I created a curriculum around that. And what I did in my curriculum is geared through C-suite executives. And it was a 4-course sequence. At the end of each course, like the first course, you had to build your own predictive analytics model. Second course, you had to build your own computer vision model. And then you had to make your own chatbot. And then lastly, you had to make your own VR headset and VR video. In fact, here, if you can see this here, this is the cardboard VR headset that we made. And the purpose was just to get them to not only appreciate what goes into these tools and the things you have to consider for use cases, but also, what can I do with this? And that brings me, I mentioned my dad, my star pupil. Not knowing how many people I'd get when I first ran this, he signed up for moral support, and he was generally curious, and we ended up selling out 24 hours. My dad took away this course, and he went back to his manufacturing company and said, wait a minute, what if we put sensors on our clutches and brakes that we make? And so if we start seeing the performance degrade, we can send the customer a replacement part right away before they even notice anything. And his boss, the CEO, goes, hey, that's fantastic. You're in charge. So my dad at 73 leads an AI team. And it's a great partnership because my dad, he's seen the manufacturing sector since the 1970s. He's like that farmer's insurance commercial. He knows a thing or two because he's seen a thing or two. And you take that experience with his recently found understanding of technology, and you pair a great team. And it was just really awesome. And that's how these things happen. And decision makers, you have that experience. I have the Deep Racer on there. A bunch of my friends, when I was working in the federal government, part of the AI task force, we entered the Open Deep Racer competition. That's the AWS machine learning RC-sized car type of thing. It's like an autonomous car competition. We were not in the international competition that was also held the same event, but this was in Vegas. It was an open competition. Anybody attending Amazon reInvent could enter. And I beat out my data scientist buddies. Why? Because I grew up in Detroit, big fan of Formula One racing. I understood all the principles of racing. How do you take a turn? How do you accelerate through a turn? How do you start? All of these things came together. And of course, even they could build models better than I could. But in the world of AI, on a proper understanding of the problem with the right data and a decent model will always beat out an improper understanding of the problem, poor data, but a great model. Now, of course, you combine those forces, my experience in knowing racing with their technology, we could have made an unbelievable team. So one thing about leaders, if you want to really embrace this stuff, you can't be afraid of, quote, looking stupid. And the thing is, nobody thinks you're stupid. In fact, people love talking about what they do. Part of my success, I started asking a lot of questions. I remember the first time I met a data scientist, I showed up to a new job. I was an executive in the government, and someone goes, oh, that's Rick. He's your data scientist. He makes all the Excel spreadsheets for you. Oh, yeah, anytime we need an Excel spreadsheet, whether it's budget, he's going to make that Excel spreadsheet for you. And I walked over and said, hey, Rick, let's grab a coffee. You're a data scientist, right? Yeah. So what do you do? Well, they make me do all the Excel spreadsheets. Well, something tells me that your title means you do something different. And he told me all the stuff he did. Like, oh, wow, so we are misusing you. Okay, new plan. Here's how we're going to use you from going on. And word got around, and all these data scientists wanted to work for me because I understood what they're supposed to do. Two quotations there. If any of you Ted Lasso fans out there, be curious. And look around, what do people do? Use them properly. And I've been on both sides of this. When I was an Army officer, I was an artillery officer attached to an infantry company. So I had to educate my company commander, a captain who was more senior than me, a lieutenant, on how to properly use me. Where should I be on the battlefield? How do I best help him? And be dumb. Richard Branson brags about being the dumbest person at his company because if Richard Branson knows more about rocketry than the NASA guy he poached to get him into space, in Richard Branson's mind, he's hired the wrong person. And that's the approach we need to take. We shouldn't know more than our technologists. We shouldn't try to be the experts. That's why we hired them. We hired them to be experts, use them as experts. And we got to really understand what's out there. Talk to people, experiment. Man, every day I find, for example, new low-code, no-code solutions. I mean, I started getting into NFTs. What do I know about that? And I find a low-code, no-code NFT creation solution and experimenting. There's Lobe. It's an off-the-shelf low-code, no-code machine learning program for computer vision. And my son makes like insect classifiers on that thing. It's hilarious. I mean, he's 6 years old, and it's really awesome. But then you really understand what goes into it, and you start integrating it into things you're doing, and then you're like, the aha moment comes, and the lights go on there. You start thinking about this. Like, oh my God, I can use this stuff. And you have to think about these things. For example, take the computer vision concept. Most people think of computer vision, especially in government, they think of it as security. What about great customer service? I mean, there's a men's store in Britain where they have all the screens and the cameras show, like, okay, let's say I walk in there and they'll say, so the person who started there 5 minutes ago will say, hey, Mr. Coyle, welcome. Here's your favorite coffee. Come this way. Let me show you the latest items we got in there. Enhanced customer service. So it's just beyond security. I mean, how you use things is limited by our imagination. Then if you want to get your hands dirty a little bit, really explore these things, there's great courses. AI Plus, it's spectacular, first rate. There's Udemy, there's traditional schooling. There's a litany of things you can do to stay proficient and learn more that's out there. So what do you need to do? Your vision. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to start? Where do you need to start? What's your starting point? How do you get from where you want to go and then where you start? How do you bridge that gap? And then also, who do you need? And really bringing in the right people to figure out, who do I need? Make HR a part of the process, because usually a lot of organizations, HR is always lagging. Get them involved. So now I want to shift a little bit to the to getting to the decision maker. This is the other part of this equation. Maybe whether you're a technologist or not, or you just understand technology, or you're the technologist, how do you get them to embrace your idea? So Andrew Ng, when he started Google Brain, he first worked with the voice people because it was low-hanging fruit, so to speak, but it could show instantaneous impact and word spread. So obviously, what he was doing early on did not tap the full power of Google Brain, but got people saying, oh, okay, this is pretty cool. And more people around Google wanted to embrace the concepts. So find an easy success to show how awesome you are. Second, live in their world. What do they read? You know, I mentioned my paper I wrote for the Field Artillery Journal. I published articles in Field Artillery Journal because I wanted to sell my ideas. The colonels and generals read Field Artillery Journal, or they read Parameters. So I was going to where they are. Today, there's so many outlets of where you can put your content. You have Medium, you can write LinkedIn, Facebook, but are the people you want to get in front of there? And there's also another workaround. Let's say you wrote something on Facebook and you got like 500,000 views or likes or comments on your post. You can copy and paste the text, email it to your boss. Hey, check this out. This is something I had, and I had all these people think it was awesome. That will get their attention. But you have to live in their world, understand their challenges, and get in front of them. And then promoting. One of the things I did, which landed me on this government task force, I wrote an internal blog post called 198 pages in 2 minutes. If you know anything about the government, you do a lot of writing. So the headline alone, 198 pages in 2 minutes. People going, I'm going to read that article because I want to know how to do that. And as this went viral, I had a lot of technologists hit me up going, man, I've been saying the same thing for years. Actually, back up. What did I do? I ghost wrote a book for a friend of mine. He had all these postings on Medium and LinkedIn, Facebook. So I had to compile all this into one document. It wasn't even AI. I just used automated software that could just compile all this stuff very easily. And so in about 2 minutes, I compiled all this into a 198-page document. Pretty cool. And in government, you're always researching things and compiling reports. The premise is, why don't we have this here? Give me my time back. And people can't be, oh my God, you understand this stuff. And that's how I got into this task force to help bring artificial intelligence to the government. And that also led to me getting involved in being a data robot. And you have to make it fun with your storytelling. I'm trying to do that here a little bit, because if it's a lot of technical jargon, you're going to lose people. In fact, some of the people think, well, you know, I've been saying this for years. They sent me their papers or their articles. I'm like, dude, I'm on your side and you're putting me to sleep. It gets a little chuckle, but you have to really engage with that. You got to do a little bit of coaching. Sometimes you get this guy, you know, the leaders say, give me the AI. Well, what kind of AI do you want? Explain what you do and explain the other components of the team. Okay, well, I'm a data scientist, but what we need here is a developer to help us with this task. Oh, we also going to need an AI engineer. So you have to explain what you do, what your limitations are, and who else rounds out the team to help with the business problem. And then educate. For example, I use the example of the gentleman who was doing Excel spreadsheets. Explain what you do and how you are most valuable to the organization. Always take it back. What's your goal? And what you want to go back to the leader with is, what's the end state? What end state are you trying to achieve? And if you're not a data scientist, you're just a hard-charging executive trying to get the attention of your managers, understand where their end state is, and then show how you get them there with implementing new technology. And then, of course, building alliances and finding advocates. Data scientists met me through a friend because he had an idea, knew I was embracing these concepts. So I was able to call my counterpart and say, hey, this is a pretty good idea you need to do. And I could actually speak decision maker and become the champion there. Find those allies who can promote you. Find the early success like Andrew Ng did with Google Brain. But don't forget your legal and HR, because as soon as you bring in technology, they're going to be the biggest naysayers, especially in legacy organizations. And then promote your success. Share. Use the power of story. Talk about the result at the end state. What did you do? 198 pages in 2 minutes. Then if they show more interest, you can really get into the minutia of how it was done. But sell the dream. Sell the dream. And then they'll want more. So that's it. I wanted to leave a few extra time for any questions that may arise. So if let's see, do we have any questions that have come in? Or I'm not sure if you're able to jump in on a mic or just type in, but that concludes my formal remarks. I'd like to open up all to you for any questions you might have.